At Manhattan University, a graduate degree is not out of reach. You'll gain real-world skills, credentials employers value, and connections to New York City's top companies. Choose from their new Master of Science degrees in Healthcare Informatics, Digital Marketing and Analytics, Business Analytics, or Financial Analytics, all built around hands-on learning and industry partnerships. Graduate ready to lead, not just work. Take the next step at manhattan.edu/graduate. Manhattan University. Lead the future.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi.
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Welcome back, everybody. It's AC/DC night here on Concha at Night. It is also BS night, but not Brian Stelter. We're not going to bring him in. Of course, we're going to bring in Buck Sexton, my old friend who has a New York Times best-selling book, Manufacturing Delusion, How the Left Uses Brainwashing, Indoctrination, and Propaganda, he meant to say, against you. Buck, how are you?
Well, how do you know it's not Brian Stelter? It could be. He doesn't work at CNN anymore. He doesn't have a lot going on, Mr. Concha. He's very upset.
That's an outstanding imitation. You used to work at CNN, Buck. You and Brian were tight. You used to go bowling together, I understand.
Oh, man. The one time I did his show was a pre-tape. He stumbled and had to redo his intro to the segment about 5 times. Was probably the least competent TV talent I've ever seen in my life. And then he got smoked so badly when he tried to debate me that they just cut the segment and no one ever told me until it aired that weekend. So that was my Brian Stelter experience. So making jokes about his low T and other deficiencies is something that I take tremendous joy out of, and I help the Republic in the process. I also help the Republic with my fantastic book, Manufacturing Delusion, which is about the craziness that places like CNN spread. But it's not just, oh, they're crazy. It's how they make you crazy. It's how totalitarians, whether Stalinist, Maoist, Nazi, or cult member, or even left-wing fake news media member, how they make people nuts. It is a serious book about the history of that kind of mind manipulation. And you know what the biggest thing has been so far about it, Joe? You'll appreciate this, as also a best-selling author. All the people who read it and go, wow, it was actually a really good book. Like, their surprise, I try to just leave aside and just, okay, yes, it is a very good book. It has a lot of history, a lot of research, but the surprise factor has been really amusing in a lot of the reviews. Like, I'm not just a radio guy.
That's the thing, right? I mean, we all think that, okay, we see Buck Sexton on TV, or he's on radio with Clay Travis, or you think a bunch of different things, podcasts, but then, yeah, we do write. That probably was the first thing that we did before we got into TV, before we got into radio. And I started to read this. Now, we exchanged some text just a day or two ago. So I got it on iBooks. I'm 6 chapters in. All right. So I'm not going to pretend that I read the whole thing. But at the same time, I could tell it's your voice. Like, you read certain books and you know who the ghostwriters are. You know that, well, there's a kind of a tinge of the person I think I know. I'm not going to name names. You absolutely wrote this. Can you confirm that right now?
100%. Every word of it. Wrote multiple drafts of it, and insisted on that in this whole process. And I know you're also a writes his books guy, and I really appreciate that. So is my co-host Clay, by the way. Full credit to him on this. I don't like this thing in our industry where people say I wrote a book and they don't even know what's in the book. Never mind, wrote the book, but they're just the pitch man for it. I refuse to ever do that, which is why I've waited so long to write the book. But I really think if people will pick up Manufacturing Delusion, which they can get on Amazon right now, we just got a restock after it sold out for a couple of days. Nice. I think they'll find that each chapter, and you've read 6 of them, is meant to be really almost a standalone deep dive essay into a different form of what you would call either coercive mind control, brainwashing. It's like, why is your neighbor Phil so crazy? Why is your Aunt Ethel so deluded and freaked out about climate change, or thinks that trans children is a normal thing? Well, there are actual things that are done, messaging, ways of hacking into their mind, if you will, that are very similar to what was used in totalitarian regimes throughout the 20th century. I'm not saying your aunt is in a totalitarian regime, Aunt Ethel. I'm just saying isolation, identity construction, forced confession, confusion, phobia. These are all tools that are used for the purpose of creating madness in politics or political madness so that people can manipulate you. And the left does this like nobody else. They're completely nuts. They push these manufactured delusions all the time. And the book is a very readable, very quick breakdown of how they do it and why they do it.
And I've noticed, and we're talking to Buck Sexton, he is the author of the best-selling Manufacturing Delusion. You tie together to the left. It's not just Democrats, but the media as well in that industry. And for example, one part that I'm reading now is how you get wine moms, for example, to get out of their wine mom mode, I guess, and then go out into the streets and literally attack ICE. I mean, that is a perfect example of media pushing something, Democrats pushing something, and then touching some sort of portion of society, in this case, wine moms, where they're out there literally ramming ICE agents with their SUVs at 9:30 in the morning after dropping off their kids. And this is the result of this whole delusion that's being manufactured, Buck.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at, I worked in the CIA in the Counterterrorism Center many years ago, but we were dealing with, one of the primary things we were dealing with was people that were in the suicide bomber pipeline, if you will, going into Iraq. And that was something that we studied and we tried to figure out, how is it that you're convincing not even Iraqis in so many cases, but people from the UK, people from random countries around the world that happen to have a Muslim population? How do you convince them to show up in a foreign country, strap on a suicide vest, go into a crowded market, blow themselves up and kill a bunch of people they'd never even laid eyes on before? How do you do that? Well, it's very powerful techniques of brainwashing, indoctrination, mind control. These are all variations on a theme. And now I understand that when you're talking about these crazy purple-haired, nose-ringed, suburban, usually cat moms, but these women who are in the suburbs of Minneapolis who are showing up, they're not strapping on suicide vests. I get that. There's differences in degree here. But think about how crazy it is to put yourself in between law enforcement operations and illegal alien criminals, in some cases child predators, murderers, gang members. You're trying to physically block cops from doing their job. You would only do that if something had become unglued, if you believed lies, if somebody had been able to manipulate your mind. And Manufacturing Delusion is really a breakdown of the playbook of how the left does that to people. And we know it's happening all the time because we keep seeing these stories. We see these transgender mass shooters. We see these crazies that want to block ICE with their bodies and force a confrontation. We see, countless instances of political madness in this country. And even the great psychiatrists and thinkers in this field of behavioralism and looking into information operations and counterintelligence, counterespionage, all these things, they would always say, yes, these things are most extreme in a place like North Korea or the Soviet Union, but there are tactical similarities. Here's an example. If you're in Maoist China in 1950 something, you could be thrown in a cell and you could be told to write a confession over and over again. Okay, well, that's not going to happen to you in America today. But if you say the wrong thing on a college campus, you can be socially isolated, forced to do the public apology tour, maybe forced to do some land acknowledgement about how you're standing on stolen land. It's all part of the same psychological processes of control. The physical, the violence can be different, obviously, but the psychological processes are actually quite similar, and that's what Manufacturing Delusion lays out, and that's why people are like, oh, now I know why my super annoying, leftist coworker is just crazy. I mean, we saw this during COVID, of course. I mean, there's so many things we could point to. But COVID was a huge example. People just lost their minds. I mean, I had airline attendants acting like they were the Stasi, informing on people to the airline bosses about not masking up enough. Like, these people were nuts.
They were nuts. And where were you living at the time? Were you in New York? Because that was a very bad
I was in New York.
Yeah.
Oh, I was in New York. That's why I live in Florida now. Sorry, New Yorkers. I love you all. I grew up in your city. I am a New Yorker. I'm a New Yorker in exile in Florida and always will be. Because I spent, most of my life in New York City. But I just couldn't take it anymore. But it wasn't, I think there's a key distinction. I think Manufacturing Delusion, the book, which I hope all of your audience goes and gets, lays this out very well. It wasn't even that the authorities upset me as much in New York, although that was certainly the case. but it was that I couldn't count on New Yorkers who were Democrats to not be insane during COVID. It was like the rank and file. They were willing to be the extra arm of the Fauci police and tell you to mask up and tell you to sit in the circle that they painted on the ground of the park and stand on a little foot pedals in the elevator. All this insane stuff, completely insane stuff. How did they do that? Well, conditioning, messaging, propaganda. These are all things, these are chapters in the book because it explains how this works on the human mind to make people believe crazy things, to make them believe manufactured delusions.
And we're talking to Buck Sexton. Manufacturing Delusion is the New York Times bestseller. They ran out of books at the publisher, so believe me, this thing is selling like hotcakes, to use a tired analogy, but it's true. Buck, I just want to end this interview as far as talking about your personal story. In other words, you were a CIA analyst, and then you got in the media after that, and now you're filling the shoes, at least one of them, along with Clay Travis, on the Clay and Buck show, which is, again, that had to be one of the hardest things. In other words, you take the offer, obviously, as far as taking that shift after Rush passed away. But at the same time, you're thinking, boy, you never want to be the guy behind the guy, but you guys have filled his shoes and the audience seems to love it. What is that? What has this experience been like so far as working with somebody else, as far as co-hosting, and then from there, thinking that this is Rush Limbaugh's audience? I mean, it really must be an incredible experience.
Well, you know, we started from the beginning by telling everyone the truth, which is that no one person could fill Rush's shoes. So they put Clay in one shoe and me in the other, and we just do the best we can and move as fast as we can. And we really view it as trying to serve Rush's audience day in and day out, because he built it over decades of being a friend and a champion and a tutor and advisor to millions of patriotic Americans. And so the experience has been both very gratifying and very humbling, too. We recognize that there's only one Rush and he can never be replaced. And we recognize that he has an audience of people that are going forward into some challenges here at home in America that they deserve and they would like to have advocates for their point of view and people that tell them the news and break it down from every day. And that's certainly what we do. So we just view it as trying to serve Rush's audience as best we can every day and use his legacy as a guide. But in the meantime, it's been fantastic. And people have really taken to the show, and it's a different style of show because it's two people. It is very conversational. And I think, everyone realizes that they're our extended family. It's like they're hanging out with us for 3 hours a day, talking about everything, and it has worked. So that's a great part of it. And you are welcome to come hang out with us anytime, Mr. Concha.
I have
Joe Concha fans over in Clay and Buck World. So I know you have. I'm just saying that you're not disinvited now that you've been once. The door is always open, so you let us know.
I text you guys during the show sometimes, like, hey, what do you think of this? And then you've brought it up. But I think you guys got the key to what talk radio is now, and Rush knew this back in the 80s, which is inform but entertain, and that is the whole trick to this whole thing, and that's why you have the numbers that you do, and we really appreciate you joining us again once again, Buck. Manufacturing Delusion: How the Left Uses Brainwashing, Indoctrination, and Propaganda Against You. It is a must-read, New York Times bestseller. Buck Sexton, my old friend, thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Concha. You're the best.
All right. Say hi to the wife and kid now. Look at you, a dad. I'm very proud of you. You finally did it. Congratulations.
If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy.
Download and subscribe
at BeBullish.com.